ASU. So I actually graduated ASU in 2015, and I'm kind of what you would call like a super senior because believe it or not, I started at ASU in 2005. I started in 2005 and graduated in 2015, so 10 years from start to finish. But I started let me put this mask down. So I started, my first major was biochemistry. I wanted to become a pharmacist. This is me at ASU back, this is probably 2010. If you search like Christina Rocks, you'll find here. She ran for student government. So basically, so I started in 2005. I was biochemistry, and then I changed to bioengineering for like a semester. And then I spent a couple of years, took a couple of years off, lived in Mexico City for 2 years doing a humanitarian mission. And then I came back and I changed majors again to speech therapy. And then I took another couple of years off. And then finally in 2014, I'm like, hey, I came back to ASU and I said, hey, how can I just graduate the quickest way possible? So they're like, because I probably had credits for like 2 degrees. And they're like, look, you can just major in Spanish linguistics because I already spoke Spanish fluently. So I did that. And so that's a little bit of my history. Graduated in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in Spanish linguistics. And so let's talk about why I'm here and what happened in the last year or so. So this past June, I went public as a whistleblower with Project Veritas. So everyone's a big fan of James O'Keefe, right? Yeah. James O'Keefe is great. He's so I did this interview with him in March of last year, but we didn't release the video until June. But let me just go back to the start here. So it's 2018, March of 2018. I just got a job working as a content moderator for Facebook. So prior to that, I've been working as a security guard for 6 months. And I found this job. I'm like, look, I want to use my Spanish. So it was bilingual content moderator, but I didn't know it was Facebook until I actually got the job. So they interviewed you and they did this assessment and they told you what you would see. So in the interview, they actually showed you a laptop and they put like explicit imagery, really graphic imagery in images to show you what you would see on a daily basis. So when I got hired into the training, they exposed us to all kinds of things. So we had to see nudity, pornography, occasionally you see bestiality, snuff videos, necrophilia, like everything bad on the internet, like you name it, we had to see it. But it was interspersed with memes and funny stuff at the same time. So you developed kind of a weird sense of humor working there. So I was like, because you're seeing like really effed up stuff, right? But then you're also seeing like funny memes. So so it was pretty fun. So we can go to the next slide. So this is where I worked. This was Cognizant. So I worked for Cognizant. They're an IT company, and they had the contract with Facebook for content moderation. So what's interesting is, so I started in 2018. The contract with Cognizant and Facebook started in 2017. So after the 2016 election, all of a sudden Facebook became really interested in what was going on with U.S. elections, and they hired thousands and thousands of content moderators in the U.S. because prior to 2016, most of them were overseas. So they hired these content moderators. So to give you an idea, Cognizant had a 3-year, $200 million contract with Facebook. And in the Senate hearings in the last 6 months, Zuckerberg has said that they spend billions of dollars on content moderation. So, I mean, they really care about the elections, and that's what they told us. I talked to some of my coworkers who actually traveled to Ireland to Facebook headquarters, and they said, that's the reason we brought so many people to the U.S. is because we were concerned about 2016 and what happened, and election interference from Russia. That's what they literally told me. So that was so I started in 2018. I was there for just under 2. That end date is not accurate. It's just the system. But Facebook, FB Community Operations. So let's go to the next slide here. So let's talk a little bit about what Facebook allows and what they don't allow. So Facebook, as you know, in the last 6 months, they've really gotten crazy. And I wanted to give you guys a little warning. So some of these graphic images are, just so you know, some of these images are graphic. So just for a warning, next slide. So this is obviously, like, what is this, a cartoon, right? And it's showing Trump blowing his head off. Pretty graphic, not something I'd want my kids to see. And as a quick aside, like Section 230, the Communications Decency Act was created in 1996 as a law that was designed to protect children on the internet, right? And then here we are 20 years later, almost 25 years later, and is the internet safe for children? No. So what's happened is Facebook is using Section 230 as just a way to protect their own brand. And so, I mean, yeah. So this is allowed. This says non-violating since this depicts self-harm. It's a cartoon. Because he's doing it, it's allowed. If someone else were holding the gun to his head, it might be a violation. But because he's doing it, it's allowed. Now, they might have modified the suicide policy and made it a little more strict, where they wouldn't allow that imagery. But this was recorded on October 3rd of 2019. And so we can go to the next slide. And this is also allowed as political speech. So this was on outside of a building in Oregon. And so it was considered real world art. And so that's why it was allowed. But you can't have, what's her name, McGriffin or Kathy, what was that woman's name? Kathy Griffin, yeah. Kathy Griffin did a similar thing. And so, I mean, it's just kind of this double standard. And the other thing is Facebook can always change their policies like anytime they want. So every 2 weeks there was a policy update. So they can change their policy whenever they want. And we can go to the next slide. This is kind of dark. I don't know if you can see it, but this is what's called an effigy. So effigy is a real world like mannequin. And they're used in political protests and rallies. So effigies are allowed. So this shows someone standing in real life behind a mannequin of Donald Trump, shooting him in the back of his head. And that's allowed. So I mean, for a company that wants to prevent real world violence, they're really not doing a very good job, right? And it seems to be slanted towards one side. You can go to the next slide. So here are more examples of effigies. So, I mean, you know, effigies of Obama are allowed in this example. And these are non-violating. So this is straight from Facebook's training deck. And this is, filmed also on October 3rd. Go to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to do a little exercise to keep you all awake. It's funny because my grandma actually graduated from ASU like back in like the 50s. And she was an education major. And so I think the old school aspect of school kind of stuck with me. And so Riley's going to pass out little worksheets, a quick little quiz, and we can go through it real quick. And yeah, so this will be fun. So this is the decision tree. As you're getting those forms, this is the decision tree. So every time, so I'm sitting there on my dual screens at Facebook, and I would get a job one at a time on my screen. And then I would have to make a decision about what action needs to be taken. So you can either take no action, you can delete it, you can checkpoint it, you can escalate it, or you can mark as. So if it's not violating, you say no action. If it's violating, you click delete, and that opens up another whole category of what you're going to delete it for, whether it's bullying, harassment, nudity, or whatever. Or you can checkpoint it, or you escalate it. If it escalates for like escalating to law enforcement, which wasn't very often, or mark as. Now your quiz, and I didn't grab one for myself. I'm going to grab one real quick. So that first, I'm going to steal this from you. Mm-hmm. That first question, so you see someone advocating for killing babies / fetuses on the platform. Can you delete this under the violence and incitement policy? No. So what do you guys think? Go ahead and put your answer in, and then we'll talk about it. So, all right, so question A. All right, who wants to give their response? What do you think? All right, go ahead.
I said no, but not because I agree with it. It's because I think that it's on there all the time. So
yeah,
they don't take it off.
So can you delete this? The correct answer is no. So that's allowed. Advocating for killing babies / fetuses on the platform is allowed, and I have an actual screenshot of that of Q&A. I don't have it here. We'll stay on this slide for now. But that's going to also be in my book that I'm working on that's going to be published in maybe 3 or 4 months that shows those screenshots and actual evidence. And so, yeah, so if anyone comes after me saying, oh, you're right-wing, Project Veritas, you're just biased, well, I have actual screenshots and evidence that I filmed. So question B, is someone calling for the death of Gavin McInnes and or Tommy Robinson? Is this allowed? Yeah, so this is question B. Someone is calling for the death of Gavin McInnes and or Tommy Robinson. Is this allowed? Who wants to answer? Go ahead, Jordan.
Gavin sounds pretty cool.
Gavin, yeah. So yeah, So actually, I don't know if you know who Gavin McInnes is, but he's kind of a right-wing political figure in the United States. Tommy Robinson, you know who he is, right? He's in the UK. He's basically an advocate against. Who knows Tommy Robinson? He's an advocate against basically immigration from. I don't know how to describe it, but he's an anti-Islam basically activist. He's against Islam immigration into the UK. He's very controversial in the UK. But it's all politics. So he's very political. So allowing to call for death for those two people is allowed. And the reason why is they're on the hate figure list, Facebook's hate figure list. So InfoWars was added to that list while I was there, and I have a screenshot of that. So people, and then I believe Kyle Rittenhouse was placed on that list as well. So the reason why you couldn't mention or even talk about Kyle Rittenhouse is I believe he was placed on that list as well. So there's a carve out for the policy, the violence and incitement policy, where you're allowed to call for someone's death if they're on that hate figure list. So is that allowing more hate and violence on the platform? Yes, it is. So you watch these shows like Social Dilemma where they're like, yeah, Facebook's horrible, they're not doing a good job, but that's from the leftist perspective, like, okay, yeah, they're not doing enough to stop the violent racist Trump supporters, right? That's their perspective. Where in reality, there is a lot of hate against right-wing figures as well, and Facebook allows more of that because there's a lot more right-wing figures on the hate list than there are left-wing figures. The only person they really put on that list on the left wing was Louis Farrakhan. So, anyways, this is actually a job I got on my screen at one point. So this says white girl's favorite healing crystal meth. Right? So this is kind of the funny stuff we saw, but this could be a violation of the hate speech policy because you're talking about white girls. So that's your PC. So you're looking for like a target and then an attack. So white girls is your protected characteristic, PC, and then favorite healing crystal meth. So you're insinuating that they're what? They're drug addicts, right? That all white girls are drug addicts. So it could be a violation of the hate speech policy. All right, go ahead. Next slide. All right, so let's look at how Facebook targets right-wing influencers. And so this is that hate speech. No, this is the dangerous individuals and organizations policy. So we mentioned Kyle Rittenhouse, and just for the record, since I'm on ASU campus, we all condemn any violence, right? And we don't condone any mass murders because it says 1.4 people who have committed an attempted mass murder. So these are things they do not allow. But look at 1.3, people notable for physically attacking people based on a protected characteristic. What does that mean? Doesn't that seem kind of vague? So if you attack someone and they happen to be white, or black, then you're notable. Well, who's notable? Who defines that? Is there a list, right? So that's something that was added relatively recently. It wasn't there for most of the time I was there. And then they have definitions for different murders. But just so you can understand, like this policy is designed for, look at that, terrorists, hate organizations, criminal organizations. So you've got the MS-13, La Mara Salvatrucha, the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, CGNG, they're on that criminal org list. And the Joaquin El Chapo Guzman on the far right is on that list with the Sinaloa cartel. So this whole policy is designed for like really bad people, right? And then all of a sudden you get like, Tommy Robinson thrown on there, Gavin McInnes, literally on the same list as Hitler. So this is their dangerous individuals and organizations policy. Go to the next slide. So you can't do PSR of these people, which stands for promotion, PSR, promotion, support or represent, praise, support or represent these people. So that's why you couldn't talk about, this is my theory, my working theory, that's why you couldn't talk about Kyle Rittenhouse because he was on this list. So you couldn't speak on behalf of the cause, like the fundraiser for him, or relay messages directed to the cause, or legitimize the cause. So pretty much the only way you can talk about him online, on Facebook, is if you say, I condemn Kyle Rittenhouse. That's the only possibility.
Or if you want to kill him.
Yeah, or if you want to call for his death, that would be allowed as well. Because, yeah, isn't that nuts? So let's go to the next slide. So this is the hate figure list. So this is Gavin McInnes. Have you heard of CRTV? It's kind of a conservative. So he was a host on CRTV. That was his crime. So there's other people here who, you could argue that there should be a list for people who are really hateful or actual white supremacists. The American Nazi Party, George Lincoln Rockwell, some altright.com, League of the South. All right, go ahead, next slide. So Tommy Robinson, yeah, so they have it looks like a profile list. It looks like something you'd see like in an FBI database, right? Tommy Robinson, real name, Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon. Previously used pseudonyms, Andrew McMaster, Paul Harris, and Wayne King. Looks pretty serious, right? And look, in the middle profile photo, Tommy Robinson is standing behind a sign that says Brexit. Okay, so these are political people. This is political speech that's being censored. And this was filmed in June of 2019. So I filmed for about 9 months without getting caught. And so that was kind of fun. And yeah. So I reached out in, just kind of give you the background, I reached out to Project Veritas in about May of 2019 after I'd been there a year. And then I volunteered to film, and they sent me a camera, and they provided logistical support. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so who's heard of InfoWars? So Alex Jones, right? So while I was working there, we had this crazy thing happen. It was an emergency. As you can see here, this is May 2nd. This was actually 2019. Let's see, was that 20? Yeah, or it could have been 2020. I think it might have been. When was InfoWars banned? I think it might have been 2020. No, yeah, 2019, right? Yeah. So this was an emergency update. Why was this an emergency? Because they were telling us that they are banning InfoWars. That's I'm not kidding. Like these are their words, not mine. Emergency update, hate domain. Please take note of the following emergency hate domain designation update going live immediately. InfoWars. Any PSR, remember what that stands for? Praise, support, represent. Of InfoWars or links to the domain should be removed from the platform. All right, so these are their priorities. You've got child porn on the platform. You've got like nudity. You've got cartel videos that I had to watch. Very gruesome. But this is their priority, banning Alex Jones and InfoWars. Next slide. And so you look at that, and then so that's a high priority. Then what about Antifa? So Antifa, as of November 3rd of 2017, Facebook decided not to classify them as a hate org or as a criminal organization. And this post is really funny, and it's a little bit blurry. I apologize, but so does someone want to read that, or is it a little? Maybe it's too blurry. I'll read it. It's a little bit. On Saturday, November 4th, there was a planned nationwide protest titled "The Trump-Pence Regime Must Go" against President Trump and Vice President Pence. The protest is occurring in at least 9 cities. The protest is expected to span a couple of days, similar to the Occupy Wall Street. There have been unconfirmed links between this protest and Antifa. There will potentially be counter-protesters, and it might become violent. The protest will take place in the following cities: Atlanta, blah, blah, blah. Important call-outs. Antifa is not considered a hate org. So they even mentioned in the post, it's organized, it's happening in 9 cities. But just to let you know, I just want to make it clear, Antifa is not considered a hate org. And so I thought that was really ironic because they basically spelled out how Antifa was organized, 9 simultaneous events throughout the US, but it's not organized, it's not a hate org. Next slide. So, all right, so Facebook always prides itself on making the community safe, making sure there's no violence occurring on the platform. We just had Parler completely removed off the internet. And why? Because they were advocating for violence, right? And at the January 6th event in DC, which I was there at. I didn't get to the Capitol building though, but I was at Trump's speech. So violence. So Facebook says we want to prevent violence. So this is a little bit convoluted, a little bit confusing, but basically imagine you're posting on Facebook. Imagine there's a post, and there's a post about cops, and there's a photo of a police officer, and then the comments below are saying, that cop's a pig. Now the cop is a private individual per Facebook's policy. So there's a photo of a cop, that cop is a pig, right? So normally if I call Jordan, if I just say Jordan, if I on Facebook say, Jordan, you're a pig, right? If anybody reports that, that's comparison to an animal, and even without a face match, even without you reporting it, it gets taken down. So that's the bullying policy, right? But Facebook said, you know what? We're not going to treat cops like private individuals. They will no longer have protections under the bullying policy. So that's what this update in section 2 at the top is saying. The process policy team at Facebook has been given guidance that we should consider PIG when targeting police as targeted cursing. So they're kind of changing the definition just for when you're attacking police, which would require a name face match NFM to delete. And the only rationale for this, I love this last sentence, that is because of how the term is used in the NA market. All right? That's their only explanation for changing the policy. That's because of how the term is used in the NA market. All right, next slide. So this is funny. Why did I get in trouble with HR? So this person sitting across from me who I filmed, I'm glad I filmed that day. I almost didn't film that day. I actually knew her from high school. I knew of her. Her name is Natasha Nice, and she's in the expose that I did with Project Veritas in June. Yeah, so I was sitting across from her, and basically, well, let's go to the next slide. All right, so to explain how I got in trouble at Facebook or at Cognizant as a content moderator, we have to go back 5 years, 2015. So in 2015, May of 2015, I attended this protest outside of a mosque in Phoenix, and it was marketed to me as a freedom of speech rally. So I showed up open carrying. You can barely see the back end of my Glock 27 there. But I'm holding cartoons. Do any of you recognize those cartoons, where they're from?
The newspaper in France.
Yeah, that famous newspaper in France, the Charlie Hebdo cartoons. Yeah, satire. Yeah, thank you. So I'm holding some of those cartoons. So one of them is a picture of Muhammad, which you cannot draw Muhammad. One of them is, so it's satire of the Muslim religion. You know what happened in January of that year, 2015, is the Charlie Hebdo massacre. So radical Islamic extremists went and murdered all of those cartoonists, and because they were drawing Muhammad. Literally, that's the reason. And then in April of that year, that same year, 4 months later, there were two people from Phoenix who tried to travel to Texas, to Garland, Texas, and shoot up an art gallery, people drawing Muhammad. And so that's why we organized this protest. I showed up, and this was in North Phoenix. Anyway, so I was there at the rally. I was very peaceful. I'm holding a sign. I'm literally holding a sign of, from cartoonists who had been murdered 5 months prior, and so that's all I was doing. And so at work, so 5 years, fast forward 5 years forward. So January of 2020, I'm at work, and I share this link to a few coworkers using the Facebook Workplace, right? So I share the link to the LA Times article. You can go to the next slide. Oh, actually, go back one. Sorry. Yeah, so I was on the cover of LA Times. So all I did was share that link. You don't have to go to it. I just shared that link to a coworker, and he reported it to HR. He went all the way to the top at HR, and then 3 weeks later, go back one slide. 3 weeks later, I got pulled in with her, and she said, and we'll go forward. Yeah, this is what they said. HR said that you're getting a corrective action based on a thorough review. It was determined that you voluntarily sent an article that was discriminatory in nature to other coworkers, right? And advocating for violence. And at the bottom, advocating or encouraging violence. I'm like, no, I just shared a link. It was the LA Times article that was saying it. I was just there holding a sign. So it just shows the bias at work, and the fact that our HR had to reach out to Facebook to gain access to those chat messages, which were on the Facebook platform. So that's fascinating, because someone at Facebook saw that message and thought that I was dangerous or something. So let's talk about what I've done in the last 7 months, almost 8 months now. So in July, a month after I went public, I submitted my evidence to Congressman Matt Gaetz, screenshots and photos and video, and he sent a criminal referral to the DOJ for Mark Zuckerberg. Let's give it up for Congressman Matt Gaetz. So 2 years prior to this, Zuckerberg testified in April of 2018 that they do not censor political speech, but my evidence showed the contrary, right? So another guy who also filmed was Zach McElroy. So he was doing the same thing as me at another location in Tampa, Florida, and I had no knowledge of him. So I met him for the first time in March of 2020 when we both flew to New York for the interview with James O'Keefe. Next slide. So I've done about 100 interviews or more in the last 7 months. So I've done a lot of virtual interviews around the world. I speak fluent Spanish and I speak some Portuguese. So I've done interviews in Spain, Guatemala, Argentina, Puerto Rico, Canada. I went to Brazil in September of this last year, and I actually made like the front page of, or the back page, I don't know, of like the equivalent of the New York Times in Brazil. And it's funny because all these newspapers don't really learn. They keep on attacking Project Veritas, and then Project Veritas sues them. So I think they're suing the New York Times right now. But this article also grabbed like some fake information from Wikipedia, and then I think Project Veritas sent a letter to that newspaper asking for a retraction. So kind of funny. But I met with a congresswoman down there. Then top left, that's a congresswoman in Brazil, and shared some evidence with her. Next slide. So these are some other interviews I did. I did one in Catalonia in the top left in Spain, which is, they actually speak Catalan there, which is kind of funny. So I can understand some of it with the Spanish, but it's actually a different language, Catalan. And, but they're Catalonia is very independent, and they want to break away from Spain. So that's the issue we're seeing a lot of times at Facebook is Facebook was censoring these nationalist movements, like in Hungary or Poland. I'm not talking about white nationalism, I'm just talking about nationalism, people who are patriots. And then I did one in Spain with the guy with the Popeye, the sailor, eye guard. And then Mark Dice there. I don't know if you watch Mark Dice sometimes. And then President Bolsonaro is in the top right there. President Bolsonaro is the president of Brazil. And his son was retweeting or talking about my trip down there. So that was kind of cool. All right, so now to the good stuff. All right, so I know you're on college campuses, and you probably have people in your classroom that identify as I, me, we. It's probably gotten worse in the last 5 years. So yeah, do you guys have that now? You when people go up to give a presentation, do they present with their pronouns or whatever?
In high school now, it's required to give your pronouns before, on the first day of school, to make sure there's no one being offended throughout the semester.
Yeah. So there you go. So transgender ideology. So this is Facebook's policy on hate speech and how they treat transgenders. So this is filmed in December of 2019 at, I'm not sure if the timestamp's right on that one, but yeah, December of 2019. So hate speech, refining tiered attacks. This is a training deck for the policy that went live on December 11th of 2019. So every 2 weeks they would have a policy update. So updated known question, KQ's known question language. Do we consider content that says a PC or QPC should not exist or does not exist violating? Yes, but the PC or QPC must be explicitly called out to determine the target. All right, so who's closest to the screen? Who wants to read that first example under examples? Okay.
First example, there is no such thing as transgender anything may do not exist in reality.
Okay. So let's analyze that sentence. So transgender is a PC, which stands for protected characteristic. So just like your religion is protected. So if someone's attacking someone based on if they're Muslim or Christian. So I could substitute like male or female there. There's no such thing as a transgender anything. They do not exist. So they're saying that's a delete. And then the second one, Jews do not exist. They're a hoax. Palestinians are a false people created to combat Israel. They do not exist. And then this last one, Jordan left. I was going to have Jordan read this last. Do you want to read that last one? Can you see the last one under mentioning the Chechens? Okay. So these are things that would be deleted, right? That last one's kind of caught my eye. I don't know if there are Chechen homosexuals. Maybe there are. I'm sure there are. But let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is in the context of an FEC complaint I was involved in this past November. So I submitted some of my evidence to an attorney with the American Principles Project, and they filed an FEC complaint against Facebook in Michigan because let's stay on that one. So looking at these two politicians, who can tell me which one's the Republican, which is the Democrat? Okay, you guys are good. You know your politics. Because normally I would think the old white guy was the Republican normally, but yeah. So John James ran for Senate in Michigan, and he had some ads attacking Gary Peters on Gary Peters' stance on transgender sports, and Facebook deleted those ads. And so Facebook, by deleting those ads, they're essentially making an in-kind contribution to the campaign of the Democrat, Gary Peters. So that's what I was involved with. So the next slide. So this is the FEC complaint where I was mentioned on page 22, where it showed bias. And Facebook asked us to identify trends. Let's see here. So they mentioned a few examples about transgenders and examples of Facebook's bias regarding LGBT and whatnot. Next slide. So so we saw the first part previously, and this is the second part. So examples, no action that are allowed. So they do allow you to say there are only two genders. You can say trans women are not real women. And you can also say Protestant Christians are not Christians. And you are allowed to say Ashkenazi Jews are not Jews. So those are things you can say. But isn't that kind of nuanced? Like if I were just a random person making a post on Facebook, how would I know what I could or could not post? So I cannot say there's no such thing as transgender or anything, but I can say there are only two genders. So I guess in this one, you're specifically calling out transgender. You're mentioning them specifically. Here, you're just talking in general about genders. Anyways, so once again, it's very convoluted. It's very nuanced. I met Mike Lindell about a month ago. That was really cool. Yeah, that was at Turning Point in West Palm Beach at the Turning Point USA Student Action Summit. So I got to meet him. So yeah, so in the last, like I said, in the last 7 months, I've done a lot of interviews. I just formed a nonprofit, back in September, and I'm applying for 501c3 status. So yeah, that's exciting. So I applied for 501c3 status, and I have a board of directors right now. And so if you go to like ryanhartwig.org, that's probably the easiest way to find all the information. But yeah, so that's the Hartwig Foundation. Let's go to the next slide. So you can follow me on Gab and Telegram. Do you all have Telegram on your phone now?
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. So I'm on, it's just, the channel is Real Ryan Hartwig. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so there was this viral video that Facebook decided to delete in the summer of 2018. There's a man removing a MAGA hat from a teenager. So this kid was being attacked. He's in the restaurant just having his dinner, and he's wearing a MAGA hat, and this adult walks in and just starts cursing at him and knocks his hat off. So we can probably click on that link. Should still work.
Watch as a man not only steals a teen's Make America Great Again hat, but also throws a drink at him.
President, you ain't support. It's gonna go great in my car, really.
Yeah, those are teens, by the way. That man approaching the group of teens at a Texas Whataburger restaurant. He has since been fired from his job at a bar.
So that was Whataburger, right? So this is a viral video. Most of the instances of the video had the curse words bleeped out. But Facebook said to delete it because the adult was cursing at the minor. So kind of a weird reason to just delete this viral video. But it showed a Trump supporter being victimized, so it would lend support for Trump, right? So that's probably why they deleted it. Next slide. And this is the actual post, the guidance. So I'm not just making this up. July 6th of 2018, hashtag trending. That long number there is the job ID, so you can plug that in the Facebook server and it should pull up the job ID. Man steals MAGA hat from a 16-year-old, and then it says, we will delete this content for bullying a minor. So, and then liked by 445 others. So we had a little internal system. We would like the comments and posts. We weren't supposed to use the reactions, but we would anyways. Next slide. So this is the bullying policy like we were talking about earlier. So this is what they said they deleted it for. Videos of physical bullying or violence in a fight context shared in the non-condemning context. But this one is usually like minors attacking minors. So it's a little bit different if an adult's attacking a minor. So this is target private individuals who are minors. So that's implying both are minors. So yeah, it was like going to law school. It was like being a paralegal.
My mom's a paralegal, so.
Yeah.
That's exactly what she does.
Yeah, you would have fun. Maybe we should try to get you hired at Facebook if they even hire conservatives anyway.
They won't want me to work there. I'm already on the list about this.
Yeah. So, like, go back 1 second. Unwanted manipulated imagery. So you can't like draw a Sharpie on someone when they're drunk. That's what that means. Yeah. There's a section of the policy just for that. Maybe it's not that section, but since we're at a college campus. All right, next slide. Okay, abortion. So let's go to the next slide. So this is the one I was talking about telling you guys about earlier, and it's on question A of your paper. Is advocating on killing babies / fetuses in an abortion context considered VNI, which stands for violence and incitement, or ignore since they're referencing fetuses? Advocating, the answer is advocating for killing babies, fetuses in an abortion context should be ignored. So yeah, there we go. Next slide. So this is kind of some of the mindsets we used. The burden of clarity is on the user. Think with your head, not your heart. So we would defer to Facebook. So Facebook was our client; they were our boss. So we were trying to make them happy. So we would always try to just do whatever Facebook said. Basically, like they would give us a guidance, even if we didn't agree with it, we'd have to follow that. So think with your head, not your heart. Be brainless sycophants, right? We ignored about 80% of the content we reviewed. So this is what we saw: beheadings, cartel violence. I kind of mentioned this. Necrophilia. If you don't know what that is, don't Google it. Okay, trust me on that. You don't want to Google that. Yeah. Next slide. So I reviewed videos, posts, groups, pages. When I started there, I was reviewing Latin American content, so all of Latin America, Peru, Ecuador, Mexico. So I saw the Mexican presidential election in 2018, but I still had access to the North American content. And then for the last 7 months, I was in just North American content. But we saw live videos, so we saw suicides live sometimes. Groups, pages, I would delete groups and pages as well. And there was a separate hate speech coup d'etat. Isn't there a coup going on right now? Aren't they trying to launch a coup against? I don't know. Isn't there an impeachment trial going on right now with Trump? I try not to watch the news anymore, but